going on? So in this video, we are going to discuss 10 different core movements. This is a video explanation of the previous video I did, which is a solo drill follow along. So we basically do these movements together and I set the timer. That way you can just do the movements for about a minute each, 45 seconds each. This video is going to be the 10 reasons why the core movements are essential and the reason why we do these movements and how they interplay with more technical movements. And when you find your passion, it ignites you as a person. You just feel awesome. So number one, we have the closed guard pull and push. So the essential reason for why we do this is we're imagining our opponents in our closed guard, and we want to make sure that we can control their torso. So being able to control our opponent is very important. We can control the distance. So why this matters is in a self-defense situation, it's either too far or too close, right? So if you have somebody in your closed guard, you want to be able to pull them close to you with your legs. That way you can minimize the distance. So that distance is basically, like in physics, it's the potential, right? It's that distance where they can hit your face. That distance, if you shorten it, then it decreases the physical potential of generating that power to hit you in your face, because it's hard for your jiu-jitsu to work if you're knocked out. You know what I'm saying? So being able to push and pull your opponent using your legs is great because you can use that as a lever to control your distance, which is great for self-defense reasons, for keeping safe. And it's also good because you can set up your chokes that way. So a beginner will see the movement and will think, oh, I just grab the collar and pull. But your legs are going to win strength-wise every single day over your arms, right? You can definitely squat heavier than you can bench press. And if you can bench press heavier than you can squat, you definitely have been skipping leg day. Walking around looking like a triangle. But all right, so that is the first move. The second move that we had was the closed guard push and pull with a hip bridge, with a bridge. And the reason why the bridge was added is because when you have somebody in your closed guard and you push down with your legs, you're basically bearing more of your weight on them. And if you can put more weight on your opponent, it's going to be harder for them to move. And that assists in controlling them. And on this one, it's very interesting when you do it with somebody and you can feel more of their weight on your torso. It's very difficult to move and to even try to break their guard or to do anything. So the ability for you to do this when somebody is in your closed guard, like you can be a real pain in the ass to them. And that is the goal of jiu-jitsu, just be a huge pain in the ass to your opponent. Our third move was the forward shrimp to hip in and sweep. Basically, when you're doing this move, what you want to imagine is you're trying to get underneath your opponent, and that's why you have the forward shrimp, and you're trying to hip in and sweep them over your torso. So you want to picture yourself as basically as a spatula and your opponent's a pancake, and you want to get underneath them and flip them over. A lot of beginners will look at a movement like this. There's some sweeps that you can do from half guard, or if for a self-defense situation, if you're in a headlock, for example, if somebody wrestles you to the ground in a headlock, you could do this type of movement to sweep and better your position. So when people first see this type of movement, they think that the person on the bottom is pulling the person on top over them, when in fact they're using that shrimping in motion to then hip in underneath. That way they can perform the sweep. So they're actually going under their opponent, not pulling their opponent over them. So this is a important movement. The hipping in or shrimping in is a fundamental movement. You'll see it in the warm-ups all the time. I've seen a lot of beginners not understand. It seems like shrimping in or hipping in is a movement that is difficult to learn at first. So I figured I would throw that in there because might as well practice it, right? So our next movement was hip switches. And hip switches are super important for setting up any type of attack. Basically, you don't want to stay flat on your back for too long. You either want to be on one of your sides or the other. So your ability to control your hips is essential and pivotal in pretty much all of jiu-jitsu. If you ever play with or roll with an upper belt, like a black belt that's very seasoned, you'll notice how their hips move. For the pendulum sweeps, again, having the ability to control your legs and having that rotational movement is important in jiu-jitsu because you're able to better control your opponent. And this movement is really great because you're able to use it in a specific sweep to sweep your opponent from your guard and end up in mount. For the next movement, we have the raised triangles. And the raised triangles are important because it teaches you to lift your hips off of the ground. The reason why it's so important to lift your hips off the ground when attempting a triangle is because of the defense for the triangle. So a typical defense that your opponent tries to do to prevent you from getting a triangle is to posture up and be very, very tall. So if your triangle comes with a nice hip raise, you're able to have a better chance of successfully completing a triangle because you're trying to beat their posture. So if you can lightning fast speed, like shoot your hips up and close on them, that gives you a better chance of your triangle actually happening. And the next movement was snap down triangle. Now the snap down triangle goes a lot with the previous movement, but basically being able to off balance your opponent is pivotal in all of jiu-jitsu. And when you get a triangle and you're trying to lock it up, being able to snap their head down to the mat and completely destroy their base definitely makes it easier for you to finish your triangle because it takes away their defense options. So defense options like trying to put a hand on one of the legs and and circling out. If they're on the ground and they don't have the ability to move because their head is to the ground, that pretty much makes the probability of your triangle happening and being successful higher because their ability to complete defenses is decreased. So yeah, that, and I find that movement too is also relevant in getting arm bars. So the ability for you to like put a leg over the head and bring your legs to the mat is something that is frequently reoccurring. So of course your legs are going to be different positionally from a closed triangle to if your legs are straight on trying to finish an arm bar, but the motion is the same, meaning your goal is the same in trying to get their head to the mat. All right, the next one is bridge and hip out. So with this one, I find there's different types of bridging in jiu-jitsu. So for example, let's say somebody is on top of you and you need to swim your hand underneath to basically get an underhook and beat their arm. So the first part of the movement, that initial hip, that initial bridge, is to mimic trying to get the bridge up to get enough space in order to get your hand around and get that underhook. And then the second bridge to hip out is doing the motion of many escapes. So this bridging and hipping out is relevant in positions, in escaping specific positions. So we can escape being mounted by hipping out, by bridging and hipping out. We can escape side control by bridging and hipping out. So it's basically one of the core movements in escaping. And then our next movement was closed guard frame sit-up. Now the closed guard frame sit-up is very important. It's especially important if you're talking about self-defense or striking, because you definitely, if somebody is in your full guard and you want to get out of there, in your closed guard and you want to get out of there, you need the ability to be able to make a frame, sit up, get them off of you, and get out of there. So if you're, let's say you're a female and you're like, I want to get out of this position, this technique, and this drill will allow you the movement in order to do that. And then finally, the 10th and final movement was a build up from the 9th move. So the closed guard frame sit up, I chose to add a post on their neck and a technical stand up. So it allows you the ability for, if somebody's in your closed guard, for you to be able to sit up and then post on their neck and get up. And I enjoy this movement, particularly because anytime, if you're in the real world and if this is a self-defense situation, especially if you're a female, if you post on somebody's neck, they kind of get the hint after that. And I've used posting on somebody's neck in order to make space. One time when I was bouncing, one guy was just being kind of a and trying to get close to me and being like, oh, I'm getting closer now, what are you gonna do? Are your other bouncer buddies gonna come rescue you? And I just basically made space by posting on his neck. And he got the hint. Like, people are very responsive to this move in the real world. So I wanted to add this in, that way any females watching will, you know, have a little movement in their back pocket. Of course, this doesn't replace actually going out and training and going to a gym. Like, I highly recommend getting to a gym, but while we're in quarantine right now, this is the best that we can do. So why not get good at these movements? That way, you know, we can get back to the gym and still have these movements in mind and have mental reps so we can be the best that we can possibly be going back to the gym. Or if you're a beginner and these are movements that you're seeing for the first time, then you'll have some sort of idea of what to expect when you do first walk into the gym. So great. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.
It's all about humanity.
Posting on somebody's neck. Posting on somebody's neck. Posting on somebody's neck.
It's all about humanity.